And my mom just joined in too, which is very nice. Hi, Ima. And we're ready to go. So, we are going to talk about Journey of Souls today and on life between lives. And this is a really sensitive, complicated subject. There's a lot of sensitivities around it, a lot of resistance for some people, curiosity for other people. And I have kind of stayed away from talking about it, even though it's something I've been researching in my own path for a few years now. I've focused a lot more on the more down-to-earth healing practices. And a lot of that is connected to, it's just much more tangible, this life and our body and the things that are happening here in this life. There's so much to work with, and I felt at a certain time that even this question of past lives for myself and my own path was kind of pushing me away from the present moment. So I was really looking for that balance of how can I go into this research of what is past life, what are the past lives, what is life between lives. This is something we're going to talk about today. And at the same time, kind of keep it down to earth as much as I possibly can and stay sensitive to people who are unfamiliar with the subject, who are just curious, who are not sure about it. So I'm really gonna kind of feel where you at. Some people might have, gone into past lives, know a lot about it, have done and read books and done your own process. And some people, this might be the first time you're hearing, or you're just curious. So I'm really gonna move very sensitively through the subjects we're going to talk about today. And I am very open to your curiosity. And this is what led me through this journey on my own, is what was interesting for me. What was I curious about? What pulled me? So I'm really open to your curiosity. If you have questions that come up, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask along the way. And let's go. So we're just going to start, and I'm going to use the slides as kind of an aid also, and go in and out of the slides. And this one is really just an important place to start with, of your feeling and where you're starting from. And it's kind of like a spectrum. From one side of the people who don't want to hear about it, probably aren't here today, moving towards the kind of skeptical, who probably aren't here as much either today, but all of us have that part of us in us who's kind of skeptical. So we're just talking about past lives and this idea. We're going to get into what that is, what is reincarnation, what are past lives, but just this concept, as we think about it as this concept, what is past lives? How do I feel about the idea of it, this thing, just these words, past lives? So from the people who don't want to hear about it, through the more skeptical, I'm not really sure if there's truth to that. I don't believe in it. I think it's all unreal storytelling, fairy tales, all of that, to the curious. And I think a lot of you here today might be kind of there in the middle, in this very curious, just what is it? What's the story of past lives, and how do I hear more about it? And the next, going further on the spectrum, is most of it makes sense. So it's kind of like this openness to, I know what past lives are. I believe in them. I believe in my own experience of past lives. I kind of have, like, most of it can fit with me, but then there's a 10% or a 5% or a certain percentage of it that just doesn't really sit well, or doesn't resonate, or I can't really connect to it. And for me, I would invite you to feel into that 10% today. So really touching on the parts that don't make sense to you, and kind of ask yourself, why is that more problematic? What is it there that kind of puts this resistance and makes you feel uncomfortable? Because that's where there's usually something interesting going on, when something makes you uncomfortable. Like, why is this uncomfortable for me? So that's kind of a question that I'm putting in even before we start talking about past lives, just to be aware of that. And moving to the wide end of the spectrum, where I guess I would find myself closest to, maybe not fully there, but with this kind of notion that anything could be, anything is possible, and this very open mind to be all of these things, but to kind of be open to that, to the different possibilities. And what I found as I was thinking and preparing is that I find that the spectrum is also kind of a spectrum, not only of where people are, but of our evolution, right? So I kind of added these arrows to kind of take us through this movement in the spectrum of where we are to where we are going. And for me, the reason I believe that anything is possible is a kind of more evolved state, if we can speak about it that way. It's not better or worse, and we're going to talk about this a little bit today. When we're more evolved, we have less resistance to life and less resistance, and it doesn't become an argument about truth or about trying to convince anybody of the existence of past life. It's kind of this very open feeling that I know in my own heart that anything is possible. And if somebody else is skeptical, I feel no need to convince them, to prove it to them. It's like, for me, it's just true as it is. And that is enough. So that's also an important part, that when we're along the way and there are things that we believe are untrue or we have a really hard time with, we're kind of one step before we can open up to that place of, why am I the one who has to defend a truth? If I feel comfortable with it, then that's enough. And this is kind of the direction in which we're moving. And from here, I'm going to take you to the story of these two men who I mentioned in the emails and the event. And when I do speak to skeptical people, to the people in the first two stages, the I don't want to hear about it, or the skeptical, or even the curious, it really helps to tell the stories of these men, because they are scientists. Brian Weiss is a psychiatrist, he's a medical doctor. Michael Newton is a psychologist. So these are people who came from that skeptical point of view. They started in a place where they had no belief in past lives, no relationship with past lives, and it kind of, the past lives came their way, whether they liked it or not. So Brian Weiss, his story, he's a American psychiatrist, I think from Florida, and he had a practice. He's, I think, in his 70s or 80s today, and in his practice, there was a client who came to him with very bad anxiety and phobias and different mental, I guess, issues, you would call it. So she came to him and she wasn't able to take any medication. So he couldn't prescribe her anything. And so he used the only tool in his toolkit that might work, which was hypnotherapy, in an attempt to go in a hypnotic state. And we're going to talk a little bit about what hypnotherapy is and what hypnosis is. But he wanted to take her back to see if there's anything unresolved in her childhood memories, in some kind of traumatic memory that was causing this anxiety, these phobias, this really difficult mental state that she was in. And what happened when she went into hypnosis was that she started sharing and describing scenes that were clearly not from this life. And this was a surprise to him, and he kind of wanted to make sure that she's not imagining or using her imagination to kind of create a story. And at first he was in that in-between state where he didn't really know if she was imagining, if it was true, if it wasn't true. Um, but what was interesting was that through the experiences she was having from these memories of what was described as a previous time and a previous life in a different body, her symptoms started to get better. And for Brian Weiss, that was enough to say there's something here. Because if you can imagine a story that makes your anxiety go away and makes your fears go away and makes you feel much better, then it doesn't really matter. And this to me is very important, because when we're going to bring down to earth the importance of past lives for this life, the truth is that it's not as important if it's truth, capital T, if it's definite that a memory that I had from a past life is the truth. What's more important is that it can have an effect. It can change our experience in this life. And this is the importance of this work. So Brian Weiss wrote his first book in the 80s called Many Lives, Many Masters. He's since then written 10 books or so. And I was very fortunate to be at one of his workshops in Italy last year. So I spent a few days with him, with 600 other people and people online. So that was part of my training as well, of getting familiar with this practice, with past life work, with past life regression, was the workshop, the retreat that I did with him. The story of Michael Newton is very similar, in which he had no belief in reincarnation. So neither of these therapists came from a background. We can talk about the Buddhist background, where reincarnation is part of their tradition, part of their religion, part of their culture. But neither in our Western traditions and cultures, reincarnation and past lives aren't as familiar. So you can't say that these scientists kind of came with a predisposition of the belief in past lives. So Michael Newton had a similar story with patients who came to him, and he wanted to treat them and take them through hypnosis into childhood memories. And they ended up starting to describe other scenes that helped them. And through this, what Michael Newton describes in his book, Journey of Souls, is that he was able to find keywords and key questions to make the process much easier. So he was able to choose. At the beginning, it was random. He was able to choose. Brian Weiss has a similar protocol where you can teach and practice a way of triggering past life memories, and what they would call past life regression, which means I'm going into a hypnotic trance, into a different state of consciousness. And through that, I can recall memories from different lifetimes, from different places, from a different time in history, and just describe what happens there. What's interesting about Michael Newton's story is that not only did he find a way to bring people into their past lives, but what happened after they would experience a scene or a few scenes during their past life, they would experience a kind of a death or an experience of ending the life. And he was able to guide them and ask and hear about what happens after. And for me, this was fascinating, just to read about it and to get into that state of mind of what happens when you're recording someone who's in a trance, in a hypnotic state, in an experience in which they experience death, in which they leave their body and are describing what happens next. Where do I go when I leave my body? And what was interesting was that, not necessarily looking for it, with his critical and skeptical mind, he wouldn't come with a belief and then try to apply it onto his patients. He stayed open in asking open questions, and this is very important in hypnosis. And what was interesting was that clients and patients would describe such similar scenarios and reactions and feelings and descriptions of what happens after you die. And it kind of repeated itself in such a clear way that he was able to put it together in kind of like a map of what are the stages, what are the stages of moving from past lives, um, from the life through the death and into those stages of the life between lives. So this is his first book, and he calls it Journey of Souls on Life Between Lives. For me, there was a lot of interest in that. So my curiosity that led me down this path took me first there into this space of life between lives. But we're going to see that both have, I'm going to separate these two teachers to kind of offer two different paths. One more connected to the importance of going into past lives, understanding past lives, and the other would be more on the importance of life between lives and what happens there and how is that helpful for us. So the next question is, what is hypnosis and how does it work? What are these therapists do, and how does the system work in which hypnosis can then allow you to remember a past life? And this most simple way, I guess I can describe what hypnosis does or what it would be is that it offers you uh, access into everything that your subconscious records. And when we start to go into subconscious, which is relatively a new discovery, you can say that the subconscious was discovered at the end of the 20th century, the 19th century, by Freud and Jung, and they were able to kind of, the same way you might discover a new continent or something new in physics, the subconscious was a new discovery to kind of understand that there's a part of our brain or a part of our consciousness that's able to record things that we don't necessarily record in our daily life or that we don't necessarily remember. And what's amazing is that our brain records everything that happens to us, and our brain is able to record uh, all the memories from what we'll say from when we're born or from even memories as a fetus, and that the brain records it in kind of this large, we can call it like a hard disk or a hard drive in which everything is recorded. And our conscious part of our brain, our memory is only holding on to the things that we need, that are really crucial for us right now. Because if we were to hold all of that information, if I would remember what I was wearing on the first day of kindergarten, or who were the people in my class and where they were sitting and who were the people at my 7th birthday, and like just to think of how many details in our childhood and in our daily lives are there, and our brain is remembering all of it, because if we noticed it in that moment, it means it's stored somewhere. So this is the subconscious, and the hypnosis was kind of a tool to realize that some memories aren't consciously remembered, that we're able to forget things, especially in the first years of life, that there's a lot that happened that we don't remember consciously. So by taking someone into this hypnotic state, and hypnosis is really, if you've ever experienced meditation, it's kind of like that in a sense, in which you can deeply relax and kind of slow down, and you let your whole body deeply relax. And by doing that, you can start to kind of change the brain waves. When we look at it, we can watch this, and there are a lot of ways to record our brain waves and our brain states today. And as our brain waves slow down, it allows us to access different parts of our brain, including the subconscious. So this is very useful in therapy when we realize that there are memories from childhood that were significant, but we've blocked them out. We weren't able to record them in our consciousness for different reasons. And what's interesting about past life regression is that we're able to tap into a part of our subconscious that records memories from previous lives as well. And this is another discovery, you can call it. And And again, for those who have a hard time comparing childhood memories with past life memories, it's not as important. It's almost like when Jung talks about there's this collective unconscious and there are these archetypes, and there's a part of the brain that's connected to something greater, that even if it was an imagination or a story that the brain brings up through this state, it has an emotional significance and a significance in the experience of how it affects us. So this is for those of you who have that resistance to feel that, how can I compare childhood memories with past life memories? It's not as important. This is just the way that we access those memories, moving through into this very relaxed state. Hypnosis is also kind of like a practice. So for some people who try it the first times, it's much harder, especially if your mind is very strong. You kind of get into those doubts of, is this real? Am I making this up? So this is a very common experience for people who are going for the first time into a more hypnotic state, especially when asked to create to describe what you're seeing. For other people, it's much more natural just to go and describe feelings and sensations. So, but it is a muscle that can be trained. So if you have this hope of, can I experience hypnosis? Can I go and remember a past life? Know that everyone can, and for some it's easier than others, and some need more practice, which just means practicing how do I relax more, practicing how do I trust a part of my mind that's kind of guiding me. And whatever it is that's guiding me, different people will experience it differently, either visually or through words. So I can just share about my own experience that I'm not as visual. And in the experiences with Brian Weiss, or I've done session with Karine also, who's helped me, I have kind of like ideas or more like words that come that I just learn to trust and to follow as an idea or as something that may have come up, as opposed to other people who can really describe full scenes with the color of the clothes they're wearing and the people around them and the sensations. So it's really how would you remember your childhood memories? How much description, how much feeling is there to that? And in a similar way, that's how you would remember a past life. So I'm going to take us back into the slides, and we talked a little bit of how hypnosis works. And I'm going to talk now about the importance of past lives and what does it give us? Why would we do a past life regression? Where will it take us? And this is the first question. What is the importance for this life? And for me, this is always the most important question, because if I'm not bringing it down to earth, if I'm not focusing on why do I need to go into a past life? How is it important for me in this life? Then it can just be this curiosity taking me in the wrong direction. That's not going to lead to anything meaningful. For me, that's important. For some people, they don't care, and they just are curious and want to know who they were and where they were and what their story was, and they don't really bring it down to a meaning for and a significance for this life. So the first thing the words I used are unfinished business, and this is a kind of tricky way to put it, but when we think of, I guess, karma is a term that we know from Buddhism or Hinduism. It's the things that we came here to learn. And I guess in order to describe this, I'm going to have to go one step backwards into the idea of reincarnation and the evolution of a soul as it moves through different lives. What is the purpose of that? And this is a really important question of why do we reincarnate? Where do we come from? Where do we go? And what is this whole story. So the Buddhist story is very specific about this cycle of going in and out of lives. But when I like to describe it, it's much more linear. It's kind of like going from a starting point and evolving and moving forward. And there are cycles, of course, but the purpose of reincarnating, or the purpose of a soul, and when I talk about a soul, it's uh, the who I am without the body. And it's very difficult to describe and much easier to experience. But if we can look at ourselves as the body and the personality that I would call Eran, and the soul, which is the essence. So I can say that the soul is like the horseman, and the body and the personality is like the horse. And I can go through and switch the horses. I kind of go from one step to the next with one horse. And when the whatever I needed to go through with this specific horse ends, I leave the horse and I kind of have an experience or a time where I'm horseless. And then I can choose another horse in another place, another body. And in that way it's kind of the easiest to kind of get an idea of the separation between the soul and the body and the personality. And the soul has a kind of like a personality. It's different than what we would think of as a personality, but it can change. So we can be different genders. We can choose to be born in a male body or a female body, and some souls prefer a specific gender, and we can choose a specific culture. So it's common sometimes that people reincarnate into a tradition, into a religion, if it's Buddhist, or if it's Jewish, or if it's whatever it is. There's sometimes a tendency, but the soul itself is not affiliated or connected with any culture or religion. So it's kind of this pure part of us, I guess we can describe. And the purpose of the earth experiences are to grow and to evolve. And when we think about it, I like to think about it as a school, right? When we enter, we have first through 12th grade, and there are these stages in which in our school system, we go through it by age. When we're at a certain age, we go through a certain grade, and when we get to the next age, we go to the next grade. And with the souls, it's not as much connected with age, it's more connected to how much have we learned and how fast we're able to evolve. But it's very similar in that way that we choose a kind of way to learn the lessons that we need to learn. And if school, the purpose of going from first to 12th grade is to learn math and geography and history and pass these lessons, then on earth, the lessons will be more like learning compassion and learning love and learning to release jealousy and anger. And it's a very different kind of school and different kind of system of evolution. And so when we touch unfinished business, it's how we move through these different life experiences with the purpose of learning these life lessons, and how long it takes, what is left unlearned within that unfinished business. And what happens when we have past life stories or experiences of a scene from a past life in which something happened to me, I can connect that to this life and understand how that unresolved story from a past life may be affecting me from this life. I think there's a need for an example here. I'm gonna give Kareen's example because she has a very good example. And Kareen, do you want to share it, or should I? I think it will be. I'll share it. So Kareen shares that. Kareen, I'll just say that she is past life. She's an expert in past lives, when if you ask me, and she has access to information from past lives And she's a hypnotherapist as well, so she's able to guide people. But sometimes she just gets intuitions that help her to kind of make that connection and understand what is connected to past lives and what isn't. So when I describe unfinished business, her story is with her daughter, where she would feel that there was this deep jealousy that her daughter felt for her. And there was this kind of I don't know if rivalry, but jealousy was the word that kept coming up. A deep jealousy that her daughter was jealous of her, and she didn't understand where it came from. Her young daughter was jealous, and her intuition connected her to a past life experience in which they were sisters, and in which Karine was able to find a man and she was alone, if I'm not getting this wrong. And there was some kind of rivalry between the two sisters in which there was a very deep sense of jealousy. And what was amazing about the story of Karine's is that just her ability to touch on that memory and realize that what she needed to do in this life was to learn and to really experience and feel what it's like to unconditionally love her daughter without this kind of rivalry. So there was a lesson connected to this life. Just that inner work that she did changed completely the relationship between her and her daughter. And she was able to release that feeling of that she didn't feel. It wasn't even her jealousy, it was the feeling of her daughter's jealousy. And by her realizing that it's connected to a past life and realizing what she had to learn, she was able to change something within her relationship. And the jealousy that was there was gone and it never came back. Is that accurate how I told the story, Karine? Is there something you'd like to add? Okay, thank you. So this is just an example, and it's really important because I have the theory down and I have some examples for myself, but just to get into this mindset of what a simple change or understanding of how an experience from a past life, as simple as we were sisters and there was rivalry and something was left unresolved in that relationship, can come over into this life and affect a relationship today. So you might start to think, and I'm just kind of turning this towards you to reflect on your own relationships and experiences. There's something about past life, things that are unfinished from past lives that have a kind of flavor to them that it's like I can't get through this obstacle. There's something so stuck here. It doesn't feel like it's connected to something that's happened to me. And yet I keep bumping into this obstacle again and again with a relationship with someone specific who's close to me, with an experience. And this is the kind of things that as a therapist, I would look for in someone's story to say, okay, this requires to do work that's connected to past lives. And I'm very careful about that because there's so much to do in this life and so many of our childhood and events that we can process and change. But there's a kind of flavor, a feeling, an experience in which it's hard to explain. I don't know where it comes from. It's so stuck. It's really unexplainable, and there might be something from a previous life, and that's where I would kind of recommend or say to whoever it is I'm working with, maybe this is something worth looking into past lives. What's the next thing that I wrote? The familiar faces is another experience that I'm going to talk about more also, but is who are the people that we continue to keep these relationships with that we know from previous lives. And this is something that most people who are interested in past lives are so curious about. Who were you to me, or who do I know from past lives, or who are the people who I was connected to? And when we are going to touch next the what happens after death and in the life between lives, we're going to touch on something called soul groups. And this is something that all the people who are describing this have a kind of family, like we have a family in this life, of souls who are close to you and who you know, and there's a deep familiarity, and you can think kind of like about that feeling of closeness that you might have, and that there's a lesson to be learned with this person, or a deeper support, that by being with this person in this life, we're able to help each other grow. And again, bringing this back to what is the purpose of coming to earth, is growing, is this evolution, is learning the lessons of love and compassion, and whatever it is we're here to learn. Sometimes we're here just to experience joy, or there are many different lessons, but these close souls are the people that we feel a very strong connection with, and who are kind of there guiding us throughout our lives. Sometimes it's someone who was there briefly, a grandparent who died when we were in 5 or 7, and we always felt like there was something that we loved about this person so much, or we are so close with, or an aunt or an uncle that we feel like, wow, my connection with this family member is so different from the rest of my family members, and why am I so close, or why do I feel so attracted to talking or feeling close to this person. It can also be sometimes our parents and siblings from our family, but not necessarily. There are a lot of people who will share that they'll say, I never felt like I belonged in this family. And that's an experience of many souls who come into families that none of the souls of that family are from their group in that sense. So they kind of feel that they don't belong. So part of working in past lives, with past lives, we kind of are looking out for those familiar faces. Who are the people who have been with us before, who we feel close to, we feel connected in a special bond. It can, again, it can be close friends that kind of are with us throughout our lives. And what's interesting is that sometimes there are people who are really bad to us, who we have repetitive negative experiences that carry on from one life to the next. So there's something also to look at that, like someone who ruined your life, or who pisses you off so much, or who really did something that you feel so hurt or angry by, and it's like not proportionate necessarily to how much you feel bad about it, and how much what it was that was done to you. So that's sometimes a kind of relationship that repeats itself from life to life, from the negative aspect, we'll call it. The last thing I'll look for when I'm looking to see if past lives is something I want to explore, or is necessary to explore, are phobias. These phobias we would describe as kind of very specific fears that are very deep. They are almost paralyzing in their nature, and they're not really explainable. They don't necessarily correlate with an experience that I had in this life. So if I have a phobia of closed spaces, or of flying, or of snakes or spiders, or of something that's so paralyzing that I feel like when I encounter this thing, um, I'm paralyzed, frozen, can't get over it, and can't really do anything about it. And when I look at my life, it's not that I was bitten by a snake and therefore I'm afraid, or that I was crushed and therefore I'm afraid of being in closed spaces. It's like, it's not proportionate. So these experiences that in modern psychology and psychiatry, they don't have necessarily an explanation for. This is where I would say the root cause, or the thing to explore. What would I look for? What would I do with someone who can't work through a phobia? Is to explore, how is this connected with a past life, and how is this specifically connected perhaps to a death in a past life? And what's interesting is that sometimes there's a traumatic death that there's no time to kind of process it. If you die by falling off from a very high place, then your soul in its experience of leaving the body doesn't have time to process that experience of death, and it kind of carries it as a trauma or a scar that stays on the soul. So we understand that the soul, even though it's something very pure and clean, can still carry negative experiences in that way, and they will express themselves as phobias. My teacher in Israel, Dr. Nader Bhutto, speaks a lot about this as well. I didn't bring his face forward, but a lot of my experience and learning was also through his training. Again, he's a medical doctor who has done a lot of work with trying to connect the emotional aspect to the physical symptoms and the spiritual aspect to our emotional symptoms. So not being able to if we realize that we are more than just a body, and a body, a mind, our emotions, and a spirit, a soul, then we realize these things are all interconnected. And when I look at an emotional problem, it's necessary to consider that what is the soul or the spirit's part in this specific aspect. Brian Weiss, in one of his books, describes specifically healing stories, how by retrieving a memory of a traumatic event from a past life, people were able to heal physical symptoms in their body that they experienced for months or years that were somehow connected to a trauma that stayed from a past life. And again, if you need that kind of tangible proof, he has recorded. What's amazing about these past life regressions, a lot of them are recorded transcripts or even audio, and are just in his books. He brings the recording or the transcript of a session in which someone goes through a traumatic experience. Another thing that's interesting is that birthmarks and scars from this life can also be connected to wounds from past lives. Strange things that we're born with can be connected to some kind of really challenging experience from a past life. And if it's a gunshot wound, or somebody who's being choked, or all of these kind of traumatic ways that we can think of dying, might express themselves as physical symptoms, or even birthmarks that are expressing something from the past lives. So these are the things we're looking for in past lives that stay. And it's just fascinating to realize how much things we carry with us, and how much it's connected, and how much there is to explore. And for you, it's more of an invitation at this stage to look into your relationships with family members and close friends, or stories in your life that feel so repetitive, or different physical symptoms or emotional symptoms that you feel, I can't really get to the bottom of it. And feel for yourself, do you feel like there's something more to it? Intuitively, a lot of times we know, but sometimes our mind wants to make a story out of something that isn't there. And then my role as a therapist in that, and an example of a therapy session would be to feel. And as I do more and more of these sessions, I kind of intuitively can get a feeling. As you share your story, it has a flavor, like I said, of this sounds like something from a past life, and this is what we can do to explore. But also there's this curiosity of, I just want to know more, and what else is there to find out about my past life. And life between lives. For a long time, this was, for me, I'm going to stop for questions before I get into that. I'm sorry. Are there any questions up until now? I just spent the last 45 minutes talking, and I'm curious.
I have a question, Eran.
Yeah.
Now we're talking, is it possible the past lives come through other like animals and stuff like that. That's I've been curious about that. Um, uh, so is that a possibility that could be like animals, insects, or whatever, or pets, or that kind
Yeah,
of thing?
good question. In the Hinduist and Buddhist traditions, you'll hear more about that. Like, oh, this cat can be my mother, so I treat it differently, and things like that. So within these past life regression, the therapist I've been following and the different, following actual people who go into experiences of past lives, people don't go into experiences as animals usually, or I don't know of any. I can share that there are people who go into experiences of past lives on different planets. And you might not have a human form, but you are a sentient being or a conscious being. So that is something interesting that I can point you in that direction. There's another teacher who I've read, I've been reading books and following her a little bit. Her name is Dolores Cannon. And the way she describes it, which I find is the best answer, is that a soul, as part of its evolution, will have to experience what it's like to be everything. And I would say within the timeline, I would describe the evolution of our soul in alignment with the evolution of the universe, which means when kind of souls were learning about what it's like to be an animal in an animal body, it would have been, I would say our souls are ageless or as old as the universe. So before humans were incarnating on Earth, they might have experienced what it's like to be in an animal body, or as part of that, the early stages of evolution of a soul. Dr. Bhutto will often say that souls, when they come to Earth, will start in Africa because that's where humans started as the species. And so the first kind of experiences in the school of Earth is territory and like, how do I survive? It's a very kind of simple school in that sense of survival and touching on those very basics. So I wouldn't say once we've started incarnating into human bodies that we would go back into animals. What I can say is that we have spirit guides, and that often a spirit guide that accompanies us will go into an animal after we leave. And that can explain why a lot of people have the feeling of my grandmother who died is here with me in this cat or I found my grandmother in a pet, because there's some kind of energy that's left within that spirit guide, but it's not the soul of the person who died. Did that give a good answer? Any other questions or things to share? Or you want to hear about life between lives? All right. And feel free to stop me. If a question does come up, please, I'm happy to stop and to be interrupted, because your curiosity will take us in good directions. And so Christy is asking, can pet animals reincarnate into other pets? That's definitely possible. Pets and animals do have souls that are different from human souls in that sense. So a pet who has their kind of animal soul might be connected to you as a human soul, and after they leave their physical body as a pet, can choose to stay close to you and to come back as another house animal. Or yeah, it's possible. I don't have any experience with that, so I can just share how it feels. All right, life between lives. So, as I described earlier, Michael Newton kind of turned me in this direction, and Dr. Bhutto also explains a little bit about this. And I wrote under phobias before TTRT, so that's the trans-temporal regression therapy that Dr. Bhutto created, which is a kind of quick way to help someone go into a past life and release a traumatic death experience, and go and and therefore release the phobia that's in this life. And what Dr. Bhutto often does once there's a death experience is guide them through a process of life between lives. So Dr. Bhutto does it kind of briefly, and Michael Newton in his book Journey of Souls describes the different stages very clearly. Um, so when we encounter this, when we just touch on the past lives, we can ignore this part of death and just look for memories. And I find that going into the space of life between lives is very significant because it allows us to kind of have an experience of what death is like. Um, and we can connect this a little bit also to what's called near-death experiences. Um, that's also recorded, and people can have shared their experiences in their books about that. But this experience that's similar, a near-death experience or going into the space of life between lives, allows us to go into the space that's beyond what's in this physical place and get a feeling of the endless, the infinity, the agelessness of our soul. Um, and what Michael Newton describes very clearly in his book, that souls have very different experiences of how they experience their death. And it's very much connected to how evolved they are as a soul. So oftentimes beginner souls, and when I again look at evolution of souls, it's not better or worse. It's like looking at a first grader as opposed to a sixth grader, as opposed to a 12th grader. You're in a different stage, and there's nothing wrong with being younger or less advanced in that way. But what he recorded is that less advanced souls are not as experienced when coming into Earth and when coming into a body, and the death experience can be very shocking and traumatic, and it's hard to kind of understand. And often there's an attachment to life, to the people close to us, to something that we wanted to finish but didn't finish. And the description of these souls often is I don't want to leave my body, right? There's a kind of hovering around the body. I'm not ready to leave. I want to finish what I started. My loved ones are crying. They're having a hard time with me dying, and I want to make them feel better and stop their pain. And it's almost like that image from Ghost, the movie, where you're kind of stuck there and not able to let go and move forward. As opposed to more advanced souls, when they describe this process, it's a much more natural and easy flowing, peaceful kind of, as you can imagine, an old person who dies in their sleep, feeling their life is complete. There isn't that kind of resistance. It's more like there's a lot of peace around death, and you can kind of, it's the description again is this going up, this movement towards the light, this thanks Catherine, no problem. And this, it's similar how it's described again and again and again, that movement towards the light. And the advanced souls are able to just do that very easily, like, oh, my time is done and it's time for me to go, and I'm ready to leave, and I've fulfilled my purpose in this life, and I move on. So we really see the two edges of how we experience death. I find there's so much importance to speak about death as a kind of taboo in our culture, where death is seen as this end of everything, and we're kind of getting a feeling of that now in these times also of COVID, and how the Western culture, if we compare it to other cultures, if you've traveled the world or gone to Eastern cultures or to India or to many even tribal cultures, you see and feel how different the relationship with death is, and how that much that affects the relationship with life. So for me, this is one of the most meaningful parts of this past life and life between lives work, is beginning to change our relationship with death, and understanding that if death is not the end, and if I've died so many times before, and if this is something that I can understand and get a feeling that it's okay and it's part of life, and it's we know we're going to leave this body, and we can also believe or feel or know that we're going to go home after we leave this body, and that home is this space in between lives. So that's really important for me, and changed something for me when I started reading and researching and experiencing what it's like to go into this space, is that kind of peace. And it changed something about how I live life when I really feel, not just understand mentally, but feel that life is meant to end when the time is meant to be, and that none of us leave a moment before our time here is done. And when we believe that, it can change how we feel about our own death, but also how we feel about the people we love and our close ones, and how we feel about their death. Um, Following this path that Michael Newton describes and that his patients describes through the meditations, through the hypnosis regression sessions, a lot of times the younger souls and sometimes more advanced souls are met by a guide or by a loved one. And when I say guide, again, you can imagine it as kind of a Yoda figure, or just someone who's a mentor in your life, just to get a feeling of someone who's kind of there for you, guiding you along your way, and giving you this direction. And our guides are something really important that are always present in these hypnotic stages. They're the ones who kind of navigate our subconscious and help us go to where we need to go. We all have guides. This is something that's clear from all these sessions, all the regression sessions, is the presence of these guides, these beings that are not physical earthly beings. They are souls without a body, and some people, you can call them your intuition, the ideas that you have, the new ideas, or that little voice in your head. A lot of times this is something in this life that you can experience as the presence of your guides. But once you leave the body in these experiences, the guides are there, very present. So there's the presence of the guides leading the soul towards the light or towards home. This is a very common experience. And moving, I'm going to go back into the screen and share these are the kind of stages, just to get an idea of meeting the guide, loved one, and taking you. And then this, what I wrote as the healing space and the life review, is the kind of the next stages of how do I process the life that just was. And sometimes there is a lot of pain that we experience in this life, or trauma or difficulty. The words that are used is that earth is very dense. There's this kind of dense, heavy energy. And once you leave your body, there's a lightness. There's a very free feeling. And sometimes, like I described, as that the scar or the trauma that's left from a traumatic death, a lot of times we need time to heal from that. So there are some souls or patients that describe a kind of healing space with a lot of light that holds you, that kind of allows you to process and let go some of the things that went on in the life. And the life review is again is more of our own reflection. Um, and what's interesting is that when we try and compare what comes up through these regressions to what we know from Western religions like Christianity or Judaism, where there's this God that's judging us for what we did or didn't do. In all of these experiences, we're the ones who are doing the work with ourselves. We're kind of our own judges, and we're able to kind of look at our lives and pinpoint where we did something good and where we didn't, kind of similar to how the religion points towards, but it's much more of an introspective work. The guides are helpful, and there's also often a description of this kind of council of elders. So there are these very wise older souls that you can kind of imagine that are very in these white robes, or this is the kind of descriptions that we use with our earth vocabulary in order to get a feeling of their wisdom and their experience. And again, they're not judging us. They're not saying you did this wrong and you need to be punished. They're more helpful in allowing us to reflect on our own lives, looking back at what we did and getting a feeling of, did I fulfill my mission? Did I do what I came here to do? Did I love unconditionally? Did I give as much as I was supposed to give to others who needed me? And these are the kind of questions that I ask myself, or that we ask as we go into the space, and our guides and these elders are helping us to do our own self-reflection on the life that was. So another description that's often found are the schools, families, the soul groups, this meeting, coming back home to a space in which we encounter again the family members. If it's a loved one who died and we've been waiting to reunite with them. Sometimes people describe a role in the other world, like there are souls that their job is to bring new souls in and prepare them for life on earth. And a lot of times their role on earth can be parallel in the way that they're kindergarten teachers, or they're working with mothers bringing babies into the world. So it's interesting sometimes to look at that and to realize there are roles, jobs, there is a life happening there. And the last step, there are many other descriptions, and again, I'd recommend, if this is interesting for you, to read Michael Newton's book, because he goes into more detail. But these are just a few of the descriptions that are there, along with the last one, which is the preparation for the next life. So if you can imagine, you're now in this life, born in the 20th century, and that before you came into this body, into the personality that you are today, there was a part of you that was finishing a previous life and doing all the processing and spending time in this life between lives space. And then when the time is right, when your guide guides you, when you're ready again to keep your evolution and move forward, you start to prepare for what's coming up in the next life. And I've heard many times, I don't know if you've heard, is that we choose our parents. This is something that is a phrase that we hear when we talk about in the spiritual language. We choose our parents, or we choose where we're to be born. And this is true oftentimes. You can really hear that in some of the clients' descriptions, in which they think or speculate in which country, to which culture, to which family will I best learn the lessons that I need to learn? Where will I grow most? Where will I evolve most? Where will I have the most spiritual growth in the lessons that I'm here to learn? And that's where my soul will choose to be born. What's always amazing is that we forget. And that's a big part of the the contract, we'll call it, of coming to this planet, is that we come with the knowledge and the deep understanding that we are here to grow and learn, and that all the challenges, the difficulties, the pains, the illnesses, everything that happens in our physical human life is the point, is part of why we're here, is for us to grow and to learn. But we forget. And when we forget that, we have a lot of resistance with our human consciousness to the obstacles, to the challenges, to the things that happen. And we don't have that wide perspective and that incredible awareness of, this is all here for me. Not only is it all for me, I signed up for this. Not only did I sign up for this, this is what was meant to be, and I planned it in this way so that I can grow in the best way possible. And just this, for me, it really changes a lot of how we live our life, and how our relationship with challenges and with pain is. Because if we realize we chose this, and we realize that this is meant for us to grow, then we can stop resisting and start accepting and start to ask, what is it that I need to learn? Why did I choose to go through this challenge? And this is, for me, the most important question. If there was one thing for you to take from this workshop and from this understanding of the journey of souls, is that there's something to learn through the challenges, and that by accepting and understanding that I took part in the choice, that I can take responsibility in some sense and react differently. So I'll let us breathe into that one, and take another moment if anyone has questions right now. Yeah.
Eran?
Yes.
There's so many questions. What about people who seem to come into the world to do evil? So are they necessarily working through, and I don't know if it's two questions or one, are we necessarily working through something for us, or also for the world around us? And then, so I understand Mother Teresa, and I don't understand an evil, someone who seems to be here to do evil.
Yeah. So the second part of your question, there is a personal purpose and meaning, and a collective for all of us. So we all have my own personal growth, and it's deeply connected with what is my role within the world and within the evolution of the world. And in the way I see it, the world is always moving forward and evolving, and the movement forward is to a place of more love and not to more evil. And this is clear. The souls who you would consider to be evil, or the people, have a role in the evolution of humanity and the world and the planet, even if it's a very negative. So you could say those horrible people were here in order to do something that was a part of the, again, from our human perspective, it's very hard. So this is a complicated question to kind of understand evil at its depth. But in my belief, in my perspective, it has a role. And Earth, if we compare it to the space where home, or where souls come from, has to have the black and the white, and the night and the day, and the evil and the light. And this is we come to a dense place where you can choose to do evil in order to learn to choose good, right? And if there wasn't the possibility to choose evil, then the choice of doing good wouldn't be a challenge. We wouldn't grow or learn from it. So the necessity to come into a space where we have the choice is for that as well. And the souls who choose evil, the soul isn't evil, or the soul is still the soul, but you can fail in this life and you'll come back again to do it in the next life. What's interesting, when people describe or souls describe karma, they can describe how they were a Palestinian hating Jew who chose to reincarnate as a Palestinian, just to experience. That's the kind of karma experience that souls choose to learn and to grow in that sense. So you could be a murderer and then choose to be murdered in a next life, or vice versa. So we are the ones who do our own cheshbon nefesh, I guess we'll call it. And what would the English word for that be? Yeah.
Settling up.
Settling the score. Yeah.
Settling the score.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's the best I can do to answer that. Any other questions at this point? Thank you, Ima, for the question. Good. So, bringing it down to earth. I've tried to do as much of that as possible as I spoke about it, because it's such a sensitive subject. And for me, bringing it down to earth is, how can we turn these ideas that can be just kept as ideas into something practical? Not only something practical, but what is the purpose of it? So the things I spoke about that are meaningful are, why am I here? How can I see challenges as opportunities for growth? What are the things that I can't explain that might be worth exploring a past life, or might have something that's beyond me, beyond this life, that require me to do more spiritual work in order to heal? I'd say our relationship with death is very, very significant as we look into the importance of this work of past lives and life between lives, of how can I change, and what is my relationship with death? How do I feel about it? What am I very afraid of it? Afraid of losing my loved ones? And how can this work also, just this, sometimes this understanding, change my relationship with death for me or for those I love? And I find it very easy. There was a time where I was spending a lot of energy into using this knowledge as a way to escape the challenges of life, as a way of kind of bypassing what's hard and saying, this is meant to be, I chose it. So I find this is one of the reasons I don't, I guess I don't like, or I've been kind of not talking about this topic as much, is because it can so easily be misused to escape our emotional problems, to escape the things that we actually have to do. So the escape would be, oh, this is from a past life, so I have nothing to do about it. Or there are different ways of using this understanding as a way to avoid actually doing the healing work and the emotional work and the exploration of why I'm triggered. And for me, this is also important to mention, that it's not like a magic wand in which I remember past life and all my problems go away. It's still a healing work and a process in which we're um, growing just with a different perspective and a different toolkit and a different language. So I'm putting here the resources. We have 10 minutes left. I'm going to talk a little bit about them just to give you a little bit of background. And when I recommend books or resources, I always recommend to let your curiosity kind of help you choose where to start, because there's so much. So I mentioned Journey of Souls, Life Between Lives, Michael Newton, and Many Lives, Many Masters, which is Brian Weiss. That's his first book. So those are very, for someone who has never heard, or is the first time he's thinking, or she's thinking about exploring past lives, I recommend Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss as the introductory book. If you have friends who are interested, if you want to share, this is where I would start. It's a very soft landing. He explains it in a very simple way with simple words. As someone who is skeptical, who bumped into this by chance, and it changed his life forever, and he spent the next 30 or 40 years after that teaching and writing books about that. So that's where I would start. The next book is called Souls on Earth by Linda Bachman, and she does the same work as Michael Newton. She worked with him and was trained with him and explores the life between lives. And what I mentioned a little bit earlier that she brings that's new and different is she describes souls who had past lives on other planets or in other places that weren't Earth. So that's another nuance or another addition to that. If that interests anyone, she's someone who's looked into that. Dolores Cannon is another great author and speaker. She's not alive anymore, but she has a few books that are very interesting, and talks on YouTube, and more about past lives. She describes also patients who had experiences with people in, like the book I'm reading now is her book called They Walked with Jesus. So she records their people who had past life experiences at the time of Jesus Christ and their actual experiences with him, the man. And so that's just another interesting historical point of view of past lives. Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani is something that will take you into the world of near-death experiences. So she had a near-death experience, went into the space where she was not in her body for days while she was in a coma, and was able to come back and heal from stage 4 cancer within weeks. So it's also a healing story along with her description of what happens when she left her body. The Unmistaken Child is a fascinating movie that I really recommend. It's about, this is more about reincarnation from the Buddhist point of view, and it's a documentary recorded, I think a little over 10 or 20 years ago, of a lama, a teacher in Tibet, who died, and his student, his main student, or his first student, gets the task of finding the child who will be reborn as the reincarnation of the teacher. And the movie is called The Unmistaken Child because he has to find the child that they have no doubt that this child is the reincarnation of the teacher who died. And they really show this whole process of how he looks for it. And I really am moved by this story in this movie. And again, for those who have a hard time really believing in it, it's another perspective to say, what if this is really true? What if this child is actually the master who died, and we can know for sure that it's him. And in connection to that, there's a whole world of research, and I put down just the name of a researcher, Dr. Tucker, who does research about children who have memories of their past lives. And this is something that has been recorded and researched of young kids who tell a story of, no, my name is a different name, or I remember where I was, or who were my family, or asking about certain people that are alive and have very clear and vivid memories. And this is just one of his books in which he explores that. And I think the people who are pulled to that are the ones who are on the spectrum side, where they need more proof, or are looking for proof to their skeptical mind of, how do I know that past lives is real? And this kind of research has a very tangible kind of, the child is remembering things that we can look in the phone book, or look, in and find who he was who died a few years ago. So that's just a few resources among many. And if you're curious about that, I have apparently done a lot of reading. When I started preparing for this, I wasn't sure where to start, and I just started collecting some of the books that I'd read, and realized that this is something that I've been working with for a few years now, and have a lot to share. So I feel I have a lot more to share, and that this is kind of touching the tip of the iceberg. So I will, since that's the end of our slideshow and we're coming to the end of the time, what do we do now? Where to from here? What are your options? So if you're curious to experience past life regression, that's something that can be done. I still don't have, I have some experience, and I would be happy to do that kind of work with you, but I would recommend Karine more than myself to do this kind of work of hypnosis and past life regression. And that's just if you're curious, or you feel there's something that you want to explore on your own. That's something that can be done even in the distance on Zoom. And I am curious to hear about your experience also. If you want to write me after and share what was interesting for you, of course, take a couple days and let some things sink in. But I'm very curious to hear if there are things that touched you, if there are things that were shocking, if there were things that I didn't touch, didn't talk enough about, that you would like me to explore. And I'd be happy to do another workshop in this subject or a similar subject. And I'll just allow the last couple minutes for any comments or questions. Karine, if you want to say something, you can. You don't have to. Anyone who wants to share.
Yes, I want to ask something. I think it's very interesting, but the fear I have is regarding the point that you would need to go back to previous lives to have a better life in this moment. So I like the example of what you told about Kareem, but could it also be solved in a different way? I guess it makes me somewhat, I feel really fear that you need to do it. So maybe you can tell something about that.
Thank you. That's a good question. How do I answer that? I don't want you to have the fear of I need to. So that's not the point of everyone has to go into past life, and some people there's really no need. And I really believe that for many people if there's no pull towards it, there's no awareness about it, it's not part of the conversation, and there's, again, trust that pull and that curiosity and the part of you that says, I just don't need to go there because there's no need, then I would trust that. And for some people, there is a need. And again, what a need is, for some people, this is the best way to solve it. So in Kareen's example, maybe there would be another way to do therapy or to do work, but there's something that was there in that specific past life that touched it at a deeper level and helped more. So again, like in the stories of there's physical healings from past life experiences. I've been doing a lot of work on what are the physical, this life emotional experiences that are connected to the physical ailments, and at the same time, there might be a need to go into a past life. So I kind of, even though I would definitely spend a lot more time working on this life, there's a kind of a need maybe to go into a past life.
Yeah, I guess it's also the insecurity from what you are going to find out and how to deal with it when you know about it. So I guess it's also that part. I believe the function of it, but it's really, it feels like insecure, and do you always know what to do with it when you found out something about a previous life?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's what I said at the beginning. When there's the fear, the insecurity, that's always interesting, just to give that space and say, why am I worried to go into that space? Or what am I afraid to find out? Or what is it there that could be preventing me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You want to say something, Kareen?
What if I say something?
On our screen, no?
No, my daughter is there.
Oh, okay, Kareen is here. She can speak live. She was watching from the other room.
Sorry, my battery in my computer is dead, so that's why I pop up into the room that way. There's many, many things to say about past life, and also it connects to various different subjects, like you mentioned, death and preparing yourself to go through this big step forward. It's very important. I'm working with people when they go towards their death time, like their last moment. And what I can share as an experience is the more you prepare yourself through that, the easier it is to jump on the other side. And when I say I accompany people, it's not just like physically, I'm not just next to the person, but I accompany the soul to move upwards and to find the light. Because what I found out is that many people are kind of lost in a way, and they don't know where to go. The soul doesn't know where to go. And it's very important, I think, if you work with past lives, it helps you when you will end this present life. That's my one understanding of it. So there's many things we can say.
Yeah.
And I understand, I don't know the name of the
Evan.
person, Evan. I understand this fear that you have. And when at the very, very beginning, I was not into past lives. I was like, what is this crap? We have so much more to deal with this present life. What do we have to do with past life? But it took me. I had no choice than going into a past life. So sometimes it's not a personal choice that you do, but it's something that it will come and take you there, and you have no choice. And be sure that when you go to a past life, you will always connect to something that is relevant to you, to something that you need to resolve in this present life. And you won't connect to something that is impossible for you to handle. I mean, we have this intelligence within us. So you have to trust that. So I think I could speak hours about all this, but I think maybe you want to wrap up the session.
Yeah. Thank you, Karin. I'd be happy to take more questions if there were any at the moment. Our time is up. Wonderful. I'm really grateful to have all of you here and with your open minds and open hearts, and I could feel it that you're listening and you're taking in all of this information and all of this knowledge and wisdom. So thank you for coming and for being here today. And I'll keep you informed about future events. My next one is Saturday in 2 weeks at the same time, where I will be doing another, this time for real, I will be doing a forgiveness. And I might come back in the future again, doing more sessions, more workshops about past lives or other subjects that interest you. So stay tuned and
ask them what they would be interested.
Yeah, what would you
Thank
like
you.
to hear about? Thank you. Yeah, you can write me later or share with me or think about it more. So